Outward is a hard game, not in small part due to its enemy encounters. There are many, and they, more often than not, can and will leave you subject to one of the game's countless defeat scenarios. However, upon completing any faction quest, you're also given the option of, under the prospect of new, unique gear, fighting boss enemies in unknown arenas that, while often harboring reused assets to varying degrees, also come with absurd health pools, damage and new combat mechanics to fight you over in all new and exciting ways. It is these encounters which I will rank today, based primarily on how fun they are, but also on potential lore, visuals and uniqueness, though I won't take into consideration the specific artifacts they can award, as that's only really based on RNG and would require a thorough ranking of all the corresponding gear options, and that'll be left for another day. Also, before we start, do the YouTube things if you feel so inclined. I want to see whether saying that in the beginning actually does make a difference. Along with the Troglodyte MILF, the arena also contains 2 Grenadiers, 2 Mages and 2 Armored Troglodytes, all of which have also received varying stat bonuses. Now, if you've watched some of my other videos, you will know that I use this fight for footage quite often. That's one, because the unknown arena teleport prompt for the crescent is mapped to this arena, and secondly because this fight is an excellent showcase for AoE combat. But unlike some AoE fights I'll get to later, this one is actually quite fun. The Queen is mostly inactive while her henchmen are still kicking, only occasionally healing them. Rather, you'll be contending with the Grenadiers and Mages while being chased down by the Armored Troglodytes, which, while maybe annoying on the first go, can actually allow you to fairly easily group them up and erase their existence from the annals of history with whatever AoE options you've got, which is incredibly satisfying, also in parts due to their ragdoll physics and death screams. As for the Queen, after her pawns have been sacrificed, she unlocks the ability to use a spell that sends decay projectiles, also inflicting extreme poison herbing towards your ass. However, you can very easily avoid them by just running perpendicularly to the Queen. The rest of the moveset isn't much more complicated either. She's got 2 different kinds of melee attacks and the aforementioned healing ability. So basically, the fight is really quite easy if you're somewhat familiar with it, but is still quite fun and satisfying. Also, having the implication of a secret Troglodyte monarchy existing somewhere out there is really quite funny to imagine. B tier. He's just a chill guy hanging out in his mountain palace. He's also, well, pretty dang easy. He is, as implied by his name, using brand, and so deals physical and frost damage, though funnily still 18 respectively, meaning the devs either forgot to or decided against buffing him for the definitive edition, as brand now of course deals 20 damage each. Outside of that, he's capable of perfect strike, which is really easy to dodge, and a wave of fire that's also not too big of a threat. Otherwise, his moveset isn't much more different to that of a bandit, and with a proper build, he's not much more of a challenge either. He'll get into the C tier, if only for the fact that he, alongside with his sword, is a reference to 9dot's first game. Pretty cool. Now, I'm trying to be nice, but this one is complete fucking dog shit. The regular Mantis Shrimp already has an incredibly limited moveset of exactly 3 individual attacks, and so this boss is barely any more complicated. Its range attack now fires an extra projectile, wow, which, if you're employing the mystical evasion arts of briskly walking, poses 0 added danger. Besides that, its ground slam AoE attack also gets additional aftershock effects, which again are not only easily avoided, but will, if they actually do lead to your death, betray an utter incompetence on your side and your side only. Also, now, I know backseat game design and all, but what exactly was the creative decision to add an elite enemy in the definitive edition in the exact same dungeon that grants you access to the boss, with the exact same amount of combat related upgrades? Joe, why? D tier. Much like with the Troglodyte Queen, I fight this guy much more often than the other bosses for footage purposes, and he's just a really nice punching bag. In fact, canonically, he has been a victim of severe bullying throughout his life, and it is deserved. The moveset is, well, apart from 2 extra bolts, completely identical to a regular Ash Giant Monk, and so it's not particularly complex nor especially challenging. Not much else to say here. B tier for being a nice test subject and funny to ragdoll. Basically, everything I said for the High Monk applies here, only there's thrice the trouble. As a general rule of thumb, if you have any sense of 3-dimensional space to efficiently avoid their attacks and reliable AoE abilities, this one is quite satisfying to fight. However, if one or both of these things don't apply, you're gonna get stun locked and presumably live through the present show experience. That is to say, get absolutely shafted. By the way, what the fuck is up with the larger one's hitboxes? B tier. Yeah, they're fine, I guess. Oh ho ho ho, okay, now we're cooking both figuratively and very literally. My flesh is melting off of my bones right now. Alpha Tyrannosaurs already belong to the toughest regular enemies in the game. They launch forwards a lot, don't stagger for too long and deal absurd damage, and this guy amps it up to fucking 11. Not only has he access to the same close-ranged AoE explosion that the regular alphas get to use, but he is also capable of 2 ranged attacks, which are deadly, but also if recognized early enough allow you to rush in for a nice attack window. Another thing making your life quite a bit harder is the fact that he is large. As far as I can tell, most larger enemies are just scaled up regular versions, and as such, the distance by which they stagger backwards when their stability is decreased is scaled proportionally. Now, I'm pretty sure that's not how gravity works, but yeah, it does, and so what is usually the best way to get in guaranteed hits only allows for very short periods of reprieve here. Still, Alpha Tyrannosaur's movesets are already pretty complex at a baseline, and the Elite gets some really quite nice extra additions, which honestly is basically as good as it's getting. S tier. You might not have known, but back in the day, Aprisa used to be, in fact, a lush and fertile land most similar to the Crescent. These areas, they were all covered in water, as the shipwrecks very heavily hint at. Naturally, in water,
chimps will drown.
Also, they might be gnawed at by sharks. Sharks are amongst the oldest life forms on the world. They seem virtually immune to extinction. However, in Outward, I would not have been saddened in the slightest if they had, as instead of just accepting their fate and dying off upon the drying up of Aprisa, they instead adopted by learning how to fucking float in the air. Evolution is not fucking evolutioning. How the fuck does that even work? No, this introduces several severe problems with this specific enemy. They are incredibly nimble, but much more irritatingly have very questionable hitboxes. Like, well, what the fuck even is this? And so, as you might imagine, having 3 of them scaled up and also capable of producing ranged attacks makes for an encounter most analogous to a brain aneurysm. Also, they inflict elemental vulnerability, meaning you can't just tank your way through the entire encounter without worry, you actually have to try and avoid attacks. This entire fight is an absolute shit show. Fucking, dude, you know what? No, Band of Chaos tier, their mere existence is a fucking travesty. I hecking love Deicide. Calixa is basically just a scaled up humanoid enemy capable of Gong Strike, Shield Charge and a double elemental gunshot. Her mace deals heavy impact damage, but otherwise it's a pretty straightforward encounter. As a punching bag, she's basically unrivaled as she's quite tanky and many of her attacks can be avoided in really satisfying ways. I don't know dude, her moveset is decently complex, but since it's basically just a mace, it's really easy to be familiar with, but at the same time she's also just a fun fight. I don't know, B tier. Regular beast golems are already pretty alright enemies, so one that's larger, thus easier to read, and has some ranged attacks to very significantly alter how you approach the encounter makes for a reasonably good fight. He's really not all that difficult, but also not a complete pushover. The arena looks cool, and having to use a keyblade to enter the boss fight is goofy as hell. I realize I really don't have an immense volume of things to say about many of these encounters, and well, yeah, most of them are kinda straightforward when it comes to the moveset and stuff. The only thing you really have to be mindful of is your preparation for any given encounter, and since that is very heavily dependent on your build, I really can't give any advice other than just taking a quick look at the wiki to see which elements are optimal or at least workable, and then just chugging potions and ideally remembering the moveset of whatever enemy the boss is based on. Well, whatever the case, Elite Beast Golem, pretty cool. Didn't cause a car crash resulting in 34 casualties in 1986. A tier. And yes, I'm being very generous with the tiers. None of these of course measure up to FromSoft bosses or anything like that. Well, except for the Crescent Sharks. Speaking of From Software, this boss would make Miyazaki proud. 2 enemies, not only reused, but also reused at the same time, resulting in a gang fight no one asked for. Neither of them get any new moves, so just put on the Entomber armor and fuck them up without having to use a singular brain cell. Fuck, I'm not even gonna continue talking about these guys, they're not worth the effort. And getting into the arena is a pain in the ass. F tier. No, this guy he's actually pretty unique when compared to his normal variety, with a solid amount of extra moves that can, and if not resisted against with as much fire res as possible, will end you. And because he inflicts Scorch, you can't just get 100% fire res and think you're immune to his assaults. And also, the horses are there, they do their typical horsing around, but don't pose too much of a threat. The only issue I have with this fight is that all of these guys of course inflict burning, which is, pardon my vulgar tongue, a dog shit awful piss idea for for a boss fight. Having dodges inflicted upon yourself completely breaks the flow of combat if you do decide to do something against it, which will, in most cases, just result in you getting proc with it again. Why the fuck can't I pronounce that? Or alternatively, you can choose to ignore it, which puts a veil of anxiety over the whole fight that I just cannot deal with without having heart palpitations and dropping dead. A tier, he's pretty cool, but yeah, the burning is fucking annoying. In the base game, I reckon Immaculate are the most complex enemies with the most varied movesets, so naturally a boss based on them can only be good. And this one very much is. He gets a rad-ass range attack and a close range blast, which in combination with relatively high damage and impact makes this guy genuinely tough even if you are familiar with his moveset. He's just a really fun dynamic fight. Also, the arena looks fucking amazing and the potential lore implications are really neat. S tier. Did you know that this guy's internal name is fucking Nicolas Cage? I don't know, he's a weird one. The perilous poultry person only has a meager 300 HP, easily eclipsed by many regular enemies. However, what makes him a relative damage sponge are his ridiculous defenses. 95% physical as well as 70% elemental resistances, uniquely including raw damage, make this guy about as hard to kill as any other endgame boss. Well, that is unless you have Rest Red or an attack that ignores defenses. Fucking hell, look at this shit. Ignoring how easy he is to annihilate with claymore builds, he uses fist weapons, so is relatively quick and difficult to read. He's also capable of an attack analogous to Prismatic Flurry, only it's weak as shit and he can summon an AoE blast, which is a bit stronger but not really all too threatening either. I don't know man, he's kinda mid, there really isn't much to this fight if you can inflict hexes or pain. He's funny though, B tier. Just like the High Monk Orc Elixir, the Elite Sublime Shell is a really nice punching bag, the only difference being that he deals very little damage and has highly telegraphed attacks, meaning he's really easy albeit satisfying to dodge and subsequently beat the shit out of. The few new moves he has basically always miss without me even having to try to avoid them. The only form of offense he can muster up is his ability to easily knock you down, but due to his lacking brain activity he doesn't really know how to take advantage of that himself, so unless you royally fuck up there's nothing really that can go wrong. But still, he's really fun to fight because he jumps around like a fucking monkey, so A tier I guess. Big Cow Thing has 2 new attacks, both of which are ethereal based. Pretty cool. Now, despite what my enthusiastic tone of voice would suggest, I do in fact harbor very little feelings for this oversized cattle, both positive and negative. It's an alright boss, maybe a little skittish and kinda confusing, but overall, he's still fine. Would this thing have brought me more joy in the form of a delicious beef stew? Maybe, but it'll still get into the C tier. Remember how you were shackled with an immense blood price in the beginning of the game, before 9 dots of resources thinned out and they forgot about that plot point? Well, if you're not a lore skipper, then you'll know that our grandmother was responsible for that. When the Scourge attacked Ceaso, instead of trusting the giant lightning god, she instead preferred relying on the aid of wind. Naturally, Ceaso was destroyed and most of its inhabitants brutally butchered. Well, this boss offers us a chance at family reunion, though you can't actually attack your nun, instead you speed up your acquisition of inheritance money by continuously killing her 2 lackeys, 1 melee trapper and 1 mage. And for being regular NPC enemies, they're actually pretty unique. The mage is capable of a sigil of wind into conjure-like lightning attack, and she can also use skills similar to dispersion and elemental discharge. The halberd guard can lay traps, forcing you to be more mindful of the area, and throw grenades, which due to their delayed explosion have a similar effect. Overall, it's an alright fight, though both of the guards tend to be rather evasive, which can be pretty annoying. And so because of that, I would put this boss into the C tier. However, there's some pretty cool lore here, very literally in fact. After defeating the boss, you can read a note from the perspective of your nun, detailing how her mistakes forced her into exile and motivated her to combat the Scourge. Also, the environmental storytelling is absolute peak. You can actually see the Ceaso lighthouse in the distance with a boat ashore near the boss arena, implying that they left Ceaso via that ship. So because of that, B tier, pretty cool. But stop fucking dodging, you fucking dipshit. In the year of our Lord 2025, there's still people out there claiming the human eye can only perceive 24 frames per second. And I completely agree. I don't see a problem here. This is perfectly fine. Apart from making my already lethargic 2080 Ti overheat even more, the Elite Torcrab's proficiencies lie, well, nowhere. It's a really one-dimensional fight. You either kill the pretty squishy crustacean as fast as possible, or wait until the entire arena is covered in real-time ray-traced jiggle physics hairworks physics flames that cause your GPU to have a transient power spike of 5 billion watts, causing your power supply to explode and kill you in real life. D tier. Normal Torcrabs are already annoying enough. Elite Gargoyles. That implies a plurality of gargoyles faced at the same time. However, all three of them think they're too good for that, and so just let you 1v1 them. They're not even remotely difficult individually. I feel like this could have been a 3v1 fight, it still would have been manageable. Their movesets are barely any more complex than the regular gargoyles, so if you're familiar with them, this is just a cakewalk. This footage is literally of me facing them for the first time in like 2 years. I really don't see how we were afforded the mercy of no gang squad here. I forgot to give them a ranking. C tier. They're mid. Miyazaki would be highly disappointed. Oh boy, he sure as shit wouldn't be in this guy though. The regular Crimson Avatar is already more challenging than like 80% of the boss roster, and, well, the Elite version reinforces him in pretty much every conceivable way. More HP, more damage types to screw with your resistances, more severe dots to make you shit yourself, and worst of all, shared with the regular avatar, immunity to pain and confusion. This fucking shit right here instantly kills the crux of like half the strongest melee builds. In fact, for the build I used to record all the melee footage, this was the only fight I had to change gear for, as without being able to inflict pain, physical damage straight up just isn't viable. Before I decided to do so, well, I died a fair number of times in fact, and even with gear perfectly tailored towards exploiting his feigned weakness to lightning, with this melee build it still took long enough to kill him that my buffs started running out. Reminder, this exact same build basically one-hit Nicolas Cage. Now, with my dual sigil mage it was much easier, maybe due to the fact that this build is virtually unkillable if you get blood leech going, but still, this is the toughest fight in the game and it's not even close. And luckily it's not because of some bullshit mechanic, well, except for the dots. The moveset is really quite complex, but as such is also incredibly fun to loot and subsequently mostly dodge. This fight has an impeccable blend of melee aggression, range attacks that force you into the defensive, and attacks that allow for somewhat lengthy punishing windows. The Elite Crimson Avatar is genuinely a really good boss, as is to be expected from what is essentially the final outward boss designed from the ground up. As such, this guy gets into the super secret Bingus tier. Towering over the rest of this game's encounters is a shining example of how to make an enjoyable cinematic mage boss fight in a game that otherwise really doesn't lend itself to such fights. And yes, I know I used fight 2 times there. I'm bad at writing, I know. Fuck off. If Outward 2's bosses can live up to and build upon the Crimson Avatar in complexity, spectacle, and general quality, I think we're in for a fucking treat of a game. Subscribe, like, fucking leave a 5-star review on Yelp. Thanks. Bye.